Hi, I'm Catherine Morgan. I'm a career transition expert and the author of This Isn't Working, Evolving the Way We Work to Decrease Stress, Anxiety, and Depression. And today I'm here with my friend, Amber Cleveland. Hi, Amber.
Hi, Catherine. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a
I
little about your background.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I am in employer branding and recruitment marketing. I've been in the social and digital space for a very long time, as you know. I think we met like more than 12 years ago in that space. And for me, over the last about 8 or 9 years, I've been in the employer branding and recruitment marketing space, and I really enjoy it.
Okay, so this was news to me when, I've known you, like you said, for years, but I didn't necessarily know what you were doing professionally. And I definitely didn't know that employer branding and recruitment marketing was a thing. And I think it's fascinating. Can you walk us through what that looks like and what the benefits for a company making the investment in doing this would be?
Sure. So what that looks like is basically taking who you are as an employer and branding that just as you would any other product or service. And so it is really important that companies share who they are with potential employees and even with people who are already employees. And I think the most important piece of that is when you represent what you are and what you're about, that really is true, and that's the experience that people are having. So from the recruitment perspective, if you say, we always follow up with candidates because we really care about people, then you should always be following up with candidates because you really care about people. And so really making sure that you are, walking the talk.
Yeah, you hear about employers, especially big employers, global companies wanting to be employers of choice and wanting to have access to the top level candidates. Is this part of that process and how they attract inbound interest to their organization?
Absolutely, because as a candidate, we do have choices, and so they want to position themselves obviously always in the best light, but also if it doesn't match up, then if a candidate also mutually selects an organization and they join, and then their experience isn't aligned with what they were promised, they'll leave, and there is a cost to that. So there are a few costs that companies can think about when considering employer branding and recruitment marketing and making sure that's tied in appropriately in the organization. And that is, there's a cost to time to fill a position. So if a position is sitting open and it's a critical position, there's a cost to the organization, and it compounds over time, really, because especially if it's a leadership role and it's sitting empty, then you have people that feed up through that leader that have nowhere to go, essentially, or they have an interim leader, which also isn't ideal for an extended period of time. You want to get the new person in there and get them up and running as quickly as possible. There's also a cost to acquire a candidate, and there's a cost, a replacement cost, if you lose somebody once they're already in, and that's probably the more expensive of all, because now you're just starting that cycle all over.
Yeah, and people don't take the time to think that it's disruptive to the team to be interviewing candidates, to be onboarding candidates. There's a lot of time and energy and productivity that's lost in this process, and it's expensive for companies to replace. So anything that can help reduce turnover clearly boosts profitability and productivity.
Absolutely. And again, when your experience that you have once you do come on is aligned to what you were told is going to happen, then it's much more likely that you're going to stay and that you're going to integrate with the team. And I think it's really important.
Is this why employers of choice often have referral programs because people who are successful in the corporate culture know people who are like them who also might be successful?
I think that is definitely one reason they have those referral programs. I think the other reason is because the experience that people have. You know, if you are, I have some pharma experience. So if you are a chemist, you probably know other chemists, and you probably know other chemists who are good at what they do. You know, and so you might want them to be your peer, or you might even know somebody that you would want to be your leader. And so when those things become available, it's great to have referrals from inside. And also you can represent that culture externally as well. So I think kind of, even though this is a little bit off of that employer referral program, I think it ties into, you also want employees to be able to share your organization's content, and you want them to know that they can create and share their own with, and of course you're going to need some guardrails and things like that, but it's really important that people are able to say, yes, this is true, this is who we are, and this is what we're about.
Yeah, I want to dive into that for a second. There has to be integrity in the messaging. What you say the company stands for needs to ripple through the organization at all levels, not just senior leadership, not just management, but everybody. You know, I often see that literally every employee is in sales because they represent the company. And whether you feel that's true or not, I think it's a good construct for us to think about.
I 100% agree. And I do think that with organizations, that if your core value, one of your core values is integrity, or if it's collaboration, or then those things should be almost tangible for every level, like you said. And I think that it's really important to make sure that if there's a gap, you fill it. And I don't mean in, you know, in an opening for a role. I really mean if there's a gap in that feeling of that core value at a particular place in the organization. If respect for people is one of your core values, then even the person who is sweeping the floors should feel that. You know, and I think it's very important. And when they don't, either you don't keep people, or you don't keep people who are happy. And to be honest, when people are unhappy or discontented, it is like a virus in an organization, and it will spread. And that is not a good scenario at all. So I think having your finger on the pulse of what's real is very important. And doing that from a place of, we care and we want to make things better, is the real reason you want to do that, not because we want to punish people into, you know, saying that they are happy when they are not.
No, that really doesn't work. You know, there has
Right.
to be some sanity checks in this, because sometimes you have a great marketing or PR firm who builds you a kick butt website that has all these great values that everybody can seemingly rally behind. And then you get into the organization and you find out it's the opposite of that. I don't want to say that every organization has to say they're collaborative and supportive and inclusive. You could completely have an organization that is a meritocracy, and we promote people from their contribution. And we, you know, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're going to be leading the room. Like, you could build a culture around that, and that would attract your right people. I don't think there's a one size fits all for this. Different people like to work different ways.
I know that, you know, one of the things that I've heard you say is like your right fit. And so I think that that is really important for people and organizations to consider alike. You know, there are people who prefer a flat organization. There are people who prefer a hierarchy. You know, it just varies. I think that there are people, that just want to do. Some people just want to put their head down and do the work, and other people want to collaborate and want to work together.
Brainstorm and
Yes,
interact and ideate. Like I don't want to say
yes,
that there's one right way to work, that there isn't. With my clients, I always say it's about affinity. Do you sort of vibe with these people? Do you like them? You're going to be spending 8 to 10 hours a day with them. Is that going to be painful or
right,
in a perfect, given that there's work and there's, nonsense in every work. We're grown-ups here on this. But,
right.
you know, generally, are they decent people? Do they treat clients the way that you think clients should be treated? Do they do business in a way that's in alignment with the way you want to do business? Do they treat their people the way that you think employees should be treated? If you sort of check those boxes, you'll probably be more or less happy there. If One thing I can tell you from 13 years of doing this work, though, is if this job that you think you can suck it up for 6 months to 18 months or whatever you have to do, and it's out of alignment with your values, you will not make it that long. You will either quit or you'll get spit out. It doesn't work.
Right. I 100% agree with that. And I think that there are opportunities even where maybe it's not the people that are going to draw you into the organization. Maybe it is the work, and maybe again, maybe you want to be siloed. Like that is probably my least favorite thing, especially from an employer branding, recruitment marketing, or even a social and digital strategy perspective. I really think it's important to operate across the entire org so that you really understand what's happening in all of the places and are able to represent that externally. And so I don't prefer silos, but I have plenty of friends who, are
They'll
more
just hide in
introverted.
their silos with their nice leader that they like to follow. And,
Yep.
the whole organization can be going to heck outside of them and they're fine.
Yep. That's exactly right.
I had that happen to me at one consulting company. I think it's worth using this as an illustration quickly. So I worked for one consulting company that, according to their website, headcount, everything was more or less identical to another consulting company that I worked for. One company was fiercely independent, political, the power of me. The other one, very collaborative, very be nice to people, low tolerance for bullying and overworking your teams. One I was miserable in. One was the best company I ever worked for. But if you were a candidate on the outside, you would have seen no difference between these two organizations. Same service lines, like everything.
Yeah. And I think, I'm familiar with your story a little bit. So I think the other thing that for you, because I think you ended up at both of them at a different point, but I also think the role really mattered, right? And so I think that it's really important, especially when you're recruiting people into an organization, that there's a high level of transparency about the role that they're going to go into, and what they can expect, or what their expectations are and what the organization's expectations are out of them going into that role. So if you're like, oh, I'm going to be in this role for a year or two, but then I'm going to move to the role that I love, that's a trade, right? You have to decide if that's acceptable to you. But
Maybe you
if
have to
you're
learn
going
the
to be,
product line. Maybe you have to learn the industry. Maybe you have to
right,
put in a little time to get a certain knowledge base to get to the job you really want. That's could be a good investment.
absolutely. And then there are other times where they may say, nope, this is your job forever and ever. Honestly, if they say that to me, I'm running, because I don't, of course I want the job that I'm after. But I don't know that I want to retire from it. And so I think it's really important to know that going in, and to be transparent with people, and to say, look, I've been in all kinds of businesses, from startups that are almost hyper local to global. And so I think that when you are transparent with people and say, look, this is where we are today, but this is evolving so quickly that in 6 months, this could be totally different. And I need to know that you're willing to, kind of go with the flow on that, because we are literally building this bike while we're riding it. And so I think that, or plane while we're flying it, or however you want to do that. But I think that it's really important to share that with people and to be transparent with people about what they're coming into. And as an outsider, you don't know, right? You don't know if they're internal politics. You don't know what a pay band is. You don't know where you should land in the lineup. You need somebody who's going to inform you of that so that you can make a good decision, and so that they can make a good decision about you too, because maybe your risk tolerance doesn't align with their values on risk or something like that.
Or maybe resilience isn't natural to you. Maybe you like a more secure, steadfast, documented, process-driven place to work. Totally fine.
Yep.
No judgment here. That's just not the right job for you. If you know a company's in rapid acquisition mode and they're buying companies and integrating, you're going to be in a lot of white water, and that's either really exciting and filled with opportunities for you or terrifying. Self-select. You know yourself.
Absolutely. And I think allowing you that ability to self-select, again, it just kind of comes back to that transparency and walking the talk.
Yeah. So in this employer branding and recruitment marketing, I'm dying to know, like, what are the deliverables for this? What's the strategy? What's the tactics? What would you help a company do, or what have you helped a company do for the last 8 years?
Sure. So you basically build a communications and marketing plan and strategy. And so you look at what the needs of the organization are, and I always start with what exists and where the gaps are, and how we can fill those gaps. In general, most organizations have something out there. I think that the biggest opportunity for almost all organizations is to look at the narrative that exists and decide how they want to participate in the narrative. Because there are organizations that say, we don't care what it says about us on Glassdoor. We don't care. And I think I wouldn't recommend that approach. And so when I've had, sometimes leaders in organizations say something similar to me, I'm like, the narrative exists, whether or not you're participating in it.
This is not a SaaS strategy. La 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 la. Not listening.
It is the worst strategy there is. So I do look at what's there, and where we really need to work, and where we need to improve, and where we can really cover some ground. And I think, especially when you're either new to an organization or you're consulting with an organization, you want to look at where are some quick wins, and then where's the long-term return on their investment in you. And so, I look, and the first place I always look is LinkedIn.
Of course. Business employment.
Right.
What's the platform for that?
Correct. And so I want to know, how their employees are being empowered to kind of play in the space. I want to know if they are really, walking the talk in that realm, and if they are, diverse and inclusive and equitable, if they're doing all of the things that I think are important. The other thing that I like to see is leadership that's involved in this process. So there is an organization that is an animal health organization, and their CEO has, for as long as I've known him, been very involved in what's in their social and digital footprint. And that was because he had a good social and digital strategist that said, hey, this is what we need to do at a point. But he really embraced that. And I think they have big dividends, not just in return for their shareholders, but all over the place because of it.
Yeah, I can see the message from the top would be great if you have a leader who was willing to do that. So from what I'm guessing, it would be different posts, mentions, awards, storytelling of employees doing interesting things. Like it would be building the humanity of the brand. Is that what we're talking about?
Absolutely. And so there are like it's asset creation from, even sometimes that's job descriptions. Like sometimes the recruiters are like, hey, I'm not getting what I want here. Can you help? But like videos and testimonials and employee reviews, they're just, that list goes on and on. But I think you want to do what you just said, where with that storytelling element, you want to think about how that weaves through everything. So if your core values are integrity and empowerment and I don't know, innovation, then you want to make sure that those themes come across in everything that you do. If you say that we empower people and then you see no one, there are crickets out there from an employee perspective, that is definitely not something you want to have happen.
Okay. Well, this was an absolutely fascinating conversation, Amber. Thank you so much for sharing today.
Thanks for having me, Catherine. I really appreciate it. I hope we get to talk again soon.
Absolutely.